From the moment I could walk, I was taught that life was a game of strategy. My father, an ex-military officer turned corporate executive, believed in discipline above all else. He drilled into me the importance of control, of always thinking 2 steps ahead. Emotions, he said, were weaknesses to be managed, not indulged. I carried that philosophy with me through every stage of my life: school, work, relationships. Nothing was left to chance. Every move was calculated. My childhood was structured, devoid of spontaneity. My father was relentless, pushing me to excel in every subject, every sport, every challenge. By the time I was a teenager, I had learned to mask my emotions, to read people, to manipulate situations to my advantage. I didn't make friends, I made alliances. I didn't pursue hobbies, I honed skills that would be useful in the long run. Love? That was just another equation, another risk to be mitigated. But even the most meticulous plans have their flaws. The first crack appeared when I met Laura. She was unlike anyone I had ever known, wild, unpredictable, untamed. She lived in the moment, thrived on chaos. Against all logic, I was drawn to her. I told myself it was temporary, a calculated risk that could be managed. I was wrong. She shattered every wall I had built, forcing me to feel things I had long since buried. For the first time in my life, I wasn't in control, and I hated it as much as I craved it. Years passed, and I convinced myself I had won. I had married the woman who defied me, built a family, created an empire. But deep down, I always knew chaos couldn't be tamed. It could only be delayed. And when it finally came for me, it was swift and merciless. Drooling over him, a first-round lock, a future millionaire. I followed football religiously, studied the stats, knew the odds. I was good at reading numbers, and right then, the numbers told me one thing. This kid, Tyler Reed, had just signed his end warrant. Laura had betrayed me. That was it. The line had been crossed. We had talked about this: trust, commitment, the vows we made. To me, those words weren't suggestions. Till death do us part wasn't just poetry, it was a contract. Could I walk away? Sure. Divorce was an option. If she wanted out, fine. If she was stupid enough to throw everything away, I was smart enough to let her. But I had already fought to win her once. Marriage was the battle. When she said I do, I won. I wasn't about to fight for her again. She made her choice. Now I'd make mine. I waited 10 minutes after they left, then started my car. I still had thinking to do, plans to rewrite. Next stop, the sports bar. I needed another drink. Once inside, I chose a booth in the back for some privacy, ordered a burger, a beer, and a bourbon, then pulled out my notepad. I started making lists, breaking everything down logically, methodically, the way I would handle any major project. I created 4 columns. 1, what happens to me? 2, what do I do about my daughters? 3, how do I deal with my wife? 4, how do I handle him? By the end of the day, I had gone through each stage, anticipating potential obstacles and adjusting accordingly. I gave myself 30 days to put everything into motion. I stayed later than usual at the office, fine-tuning everything before heading home. By then, I had calmed down enough to act normal. I had also come up with a cover story. If Laura noticed anything off, she'd get a believable explanation. The doctor said I needed to slow down. The years of overworking had taken a toll. He wanted me to cut back, exercise more, focus on my health. It was a reasonable excuse for being more distant, for avoiding closeness. I could never touch her again, but she didn't need to know that. That night, I played the role of the exhausted husband perfectly. No need to fake it. I really was drained, both physically and mentally. Laura seemed to pick up on my mood and tried to be gentle, offering sympathy I didn't want or need. She asked about my work, about the deadline that had kept me at the office. I fed her some nonsense about a last-minute design issue, throwing in just enough technical jargon to make it convincing. She didn't know enough about my job to question it. The next morning, I was up at the crack of dawn. I had a lot to get done, and time wasn't something I intended to waste. Calls needed to be made, appointments scheduled, plans set in motion. But before I dove into all that, let's make one thing clear. Everything we owned, every last bit of it, was in my name. The business, mine. We built it after we got married, sure, but I was the one with the money, the authority, and the know-how to make it happen. I registered it as a sole proprietorship. My name was the only one on the paperwork. Laura? She had nothing to do with it, at least legally. The house? Also mine. The mortgage, the deed, everything was under my name. When we bought it, I figured it was just easier that way. She didn't have an income, and putting her name on it would have only tanked her already weak credit score. Back then, it didn't matter. We thought we'd be together forever. If anything ever happened to me, she'd inherit everything anyway. Hell, I even had a will that made sure of it. But by the end of the week, I had a new will signed and notarized, and trust me, Laura's name wasn't anywhere near it. I also hired a private investigator, not because I needed more proof. Oh no, I knew what she was doing, but my daughters, Olivia and Emma, they'd need more than my word. So I made sure there'd be undeniable evidence. That was the easy part. I picked up the phone and called the one person I knew I could trust, my sister, Sophie. The moment she answered, I greeted her with an exaggerated sweetness. "Sophie, how's my dear sweet sister today?" Her response was immediate and unimpressed. "Oh, hell no, you only pull that dear sweet sister crap when you want something." "What is it?" I sighed dramatically. "Wow, you wound me. Maybe I just wanted to check in, see how my favorite sister is doing." Sophie snorted. "Favorite? Ethan, I'm your only sister, you idiot. Get to the point." I rolled my eyes, even though she couldn't see it. "You're impossible. Fine, how about lunch? My treat. We haven't caught up in a while." There was a long pause, then she snorted again. "Are you out of your damn mind?" My attorney, Mark Sullivan, stared at me like I'd just lost it, his fists clenched on the desk between us. "They've got you dead to rights. Do you even get how screwed you are? 12 witnesses, your own wife among them. 3 different security cameras caught you clear as day. Your fingerprints all over the weapons. DNA everywhere. And let's not forget the cops. They caught you in the act. Body cams recording every damn second." He wasn't wrong. I had nothing to argue, no way to deny it. And I understood why he thought I was crazy for refusing the deal. 5 years in prison, 5 more on probation if I admitted guilt. If I fought it, I was looking at 15, maybe 20 years. A rational man would take the deal. A smart one wouldn't have been caught in the first place. But I wasn't trying to be smart. "Oh crap, you're being nice. You're offering to pay, and you're actually suggesting meeting up," Sophie said, her voice dripping with suspicion. "Let me go check outside to see if the sky is falling. Maybe the 4 horsemen are trotting down Main Street." I couldn't help but smirk. Sophie and I had always been close. After our parents died, it was just the 2 of us. She'd gone through her own hell, a marriage to a cheating asshole, followed by years of rebuilding her life. 5 years ago, she'd finally kicked the loser to the curb, gone back to school, and earned her MBA. Now she was working as an account manager for a manufacturing firm, one of my clients. Actually, she was sharper than half the executives she answered to, and it was only a matter of time before she climbed her way to the top. If she hadn't wasted years on that dirtbag ex-husband, she'd probably be running the place by now. I didn't bother with pleasantries. Seriously, Soph, I need to talk. Take the day off. Meet me at Hammerhead's at 11. She hesitated. Damn, you actually sound serious and desperate. I don't like it. You shouldn't just be there. Silence stretched between us for a beat, then her voice softened. It's bad, isn't it? I exhaled. It's worse than you think. A sigh came from the other end of the line. All right, big brother, I'll be there. You know I owe you everything for how you helped me back then. You don't owe me crap, Sophie, I shot back. You're my sister. Family takes care of each other. Good, she said firmly. Then I guess it's my turn to take care of you this time. When she arrived, I was already seated at the back. Same corner table I always chose. The hostess pointed her in my direction, and she slid into the booth across from me. Do you have to go back to work today? I asked. Nope, she replied, folding her arms with a satisfied smirk. You told me to take the day off, so I did. I waved down the waitress and placed our order. I knew Sophie's favourites by heart, so I didn't bother asking. When the drinks arrived, a bourbon for me. She arched an eyebrow. Bourbon before noon. Jesus, this must really be the end of the world. I took a sip and muttered, not quite, but close. Then, leaning forward, I got to the point. All right. Listen up, Soph. You know I've been trying to get you to come work for me for years. I get why you've refused. You wanted to make it on your own, didn't want people whispering about nepotism. But I need you now, and I'm not just asking you to work for me. I need you to take over. Her brows pulled together. Take over? What the hell are you talking about? I met her gaze. I need you to step in as CEO. I need you to run the business at least until Olivia and Emma are ready. They'll need a mentor, someone to guide them until they're old enough to take the reins. When they hit 30, you can start transitioning them into leadership. Olivia will likely take over as COO, Emma as general manager. After that, you can retire, work as a consultant, whatever the hell you want. She narrowed her eyes. Ethan, this is starting to sound suspicious as hell. If I take over your company, train your daughters, and set them up for leadership, what the hell are you planning to do? You conveniently left that part out. I let out a slow breath. Yeah, I was hoping you'd just say yes so I wouldn't have to explain right now. Her expression hardened. Ethan, talk. I hesitated before finally speaking. A week ago, I found out 2 things, both on the same damn day. Sophie's eyes locked onto mine, her expression tense. 1, I'm dying, pancreatic cancer. It's terminal, no treatment. If I'm lucky, I've got 6 months, more realistically 3, maybe 4. Her face went pale. And 2, Laura is cheating on me. Sophie exhaled sharply, gripping the edge of the table. Jesus Christ, Ethan! I nodded grimly. Yeah, so here's the deal. I've already handled everything for the girls. You're going to be their trustee. Laura gets nothing. Everything is locked into trust that you and my lawyer will control. Her fingers tightened, but she stayed silent, absorbing my words. The company? Already transferred to a business entity owned by you, Olivia, and Emma, the house, sold it to the company, so it's no longer in my name either. Legally, Laura is entitled to jack crap. She swallowed hard. You really planned this all out. Had to, I said. I need you to start transitioning into this role now. Spend a few hours each evening in my office, some weekends too. Over the next 2 weeks, I'll get you up to speed. Once you're ready, you'll quit your job and take over full time. I'll stick around to guide you for a week or two, but after that, I let out a slow breath. You're on your own. Silence stretched between us. Sophie just sat there, gripping the edge of the table, trying to process what I'd just told her. I didn't say anything. I just let it sink in. Our meals arrived, but neither of us spoke as we ate. The silence wasn't awkward. It was heavy, filled with unspoken thoughts. Sophie was still processing everything, and I didn't feel like forcing conversation. The waitress came by to clear our plates, and without hesitation, my sister ordered another shot of bourbon. She tossed it back like she was bracing for impact, then set the empty glass down with a sharp clink. "You're a real piece of work, you know that?" she said finally, her voice carrying more frustration than anger. "Dropping all this on me like a goddamn bomb. You're screwing me over, Ethan." I leaned back in my chair, nodding. "Yeah, I know. And if there was any other way, I wouldn't be doing this to you." She exhaled through her nose, shaking her head. "Of course I'll do it. It's not like you left me with much of a choice." Over the next few days, I spent long hours making sure the business was squared away, then even longer training Sophie at night. Weekends were no exception. We spent entire days at the office, going over every detail. Laura started noticing. She wasn't blind. I'd come home late, barely eat, and crash almost immediately. Sex wasn't even a possibility. I was too drained to think about it, let alone do anything. She tried to bring it up, concerned about how hard I was working, but I fed her a simple explanation. Big projects. Tight deadlines. I told her, a couple of weeks and it'll all be done. I'm also making some changes that'll lighten my workload, make things easier on me in the long run. She wasn't thrilled, but she bought it. By Friday, Sophie had officially wrapped up her old job and was set to start with me on Monday. That same day, the private investigator delivered his final report. Sitting in his office, I flipped through the evidence. It wasn't a surprise, but it was still a punch to the gut. 3 times a week, Laura and Tyler Reed snuck off campus and met at a cheap motel. Photos, time-stamped logs, even a short video captured through a cracked curtain. There was no ambiguity. She was screwing him. That Sunday night, Sophie and I went over everything again at the office, covering every last detail to make sure she was ready to step into her new role. It had been an exhausting day, and I felt it. My body was slowing down, the illness creeping in more and more each day. I knew I didn't have long before I was too weak to handle what needed to be done. "All right," I said finally, leaning back in my chair. "That's about everything. From 7 tomorrow morning, you're officially in charge. The lawyer and accountant signed off on everything, and all necessary documents have been notarized. You control the company and the trust now." She eyed me suspiciously. "That sounds way too final." I hesitated, then exhaled. "One last thing. At some point, you're going to get a call from my lawyer. When that happens, I need you to post bail for me." Her jaw tightened. "Crap, you're about to do something incredibly stupid, aren't you?" "Depends on who you ask," I said, smirking slightly. "Ethan," she said, her tone sharp, "butchers don't get bail. Nobody's dying." I assured her, not my plan. I just want them to live with what they've done. By 2 p.m. the next day, I was crouched behind a large SUV in the motel parking lot, waiting. Laura's car was parked just a few feet away. My heart wasn't racing. I wasn't nervous. I was calm, focused. I had known from the start that this needed to be fast and brutal. There was no chance I could take Tyler Reed in a fair fight. He was younger, stronger, a trained athlete in peak condition. I was already losing strength by the day. I heard the familiar beep of a key fob unlocking the car. They were laughing, talking about something meaningless. He reached for the passenger door handle. That was my moment. I moved fast, rounding the SUV in a single step. Laura's eyes went wide as she saw me. She didn't even have time to scream before the bat came down hard on his right hand, which had been resting on the car's roof. A sharp impact landed, followed by a cry of pain echoing through the air. I didn't hesitate. I followed through, striking with precision and intent. He dropped like a rock, crumpling onto the pavement, his body curling in on itself. He was gasping, moaning in agony, clutching at his shattered hand and his groin at the same time. I raised the bat again and drove it into his knees, one after the other. 2 more brutal cracks echoed through the parking lot as both kneecaps shattered. I lifted the bat one last time, aiming for his elbow, then suddenly agony exploded through my body. It was like being hit by lightning. My muscles locked up, my nerves screamed, and the world tilted. Then everything went black. When I came to, I was lying face down on the pavement, my wrists locked behind me in handcuffs. My body still tingled from the shock, my head spinning. I barely had time to process what had happened before the pieces clicked together. Bad timing. A patrol car had been passing by just as I launched my attack. They saw everything. The moment I stepped out from behind the SUV, the first swing of the bat, Tyler collapsing. Before I could finish the job, they tased me. I barely felt it when they yanked me to my feet and shoved me into the back of a police cruiser. Through the window, I watched Laura lose her mind, sobbing and flailing as she tried to explain everything to a female officer, her hands waving wildly, her voice rising hysterically. I, on the other hand, sat there in the back seat, calm as ever. "Have you completely lost your goddamn mind?" My attorney, Mark Sullivan, glared at me, his patience long gone. "They have everything on you, a dozen witnesses, your wife included, not to mention crystal clear security footage from 3 different angles. Middle of the damn day, no shadows to hide in. Your DNA and fingerprints are all over the weapons, your motive written out like a goddamn novel. And on top of all that, the cops literally caught you in the act. Their own body cams recorded you taking him apart." I didn't argue. He wasn't wrong. If I were him, I'd think I was insane too. The DA had offered me a deal, 5 years in prison, 5 years probation. If I refused and went to trial, I'd be looking at 15, maybe 20 behind bars. A smart person would have taken the deal. A truly smart person wouldn't have been in this situation in the first place. Maybe they wouldn't have committed the crime, or if they had, they would have been smarter about it, cleaned up the evidence, covered their tracks. But I did it, and I didn't give a damn who knew. Mark sighed heavily, rubbing his temples. "Look," he said, his voice slower now, strained. "You hired me to represent you, and I'm telling you, you're screwed. The only reason the DA even put a deal on the table is because they're swamped with cases. You take it, you save yourself a world of trouble." I leaned back, completely unfazed. "So when's the trial?" I asked. "How long will it take, and when will sentencing happen?" He stared at me like he was seeing an alien. Jesus Christ. After a moment, he exhaled, pinching the bridge of his nose. Because of the pandemic backlog, it'll take about 6 months for the trial to even start. Got it, I said. Call my sister. Let her know what my bail is. She'll cover it. It won't be cheap. Not your problem, I shot back. Sophie posted my bail, but not immediately. She left me sitting in a cell for a couple of days to cool off. Good, I needed it. Laura surprised me by coming to see me while I was still locked up. She looked nervous, like a woman stepping onto a minefield. I'm sorry, she started, her voice barely above a whisper. The next day, Sophie picked me up from jail and drove me straight to the office. She was quiet at first, but when we finally sat down, she turned to me, arms crossed. If your goal was to end his career, congratulations, you did it. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, she exhaled. Doctors say Tyler'll never play again, even for fun. Right hand completely wrecked. They're hoping for maybe 50% function at best. Knees shattered. He'll walk again, but that's all he'll ever do. His elbow won't ever fully straighten again. I nodded slowly. So I got what I wanted. Sophie's jaw tightened. Why go that far? I looked her dead in the eye. Because he took one of the most valuable things I had, so I took the most valuable thing he had. He stole my wife. I stole football from him. An eye for an eye, a future for a future. Later that evening, Sophie forced me to face Olivia and Emma. 30 minutes later, I sat across from my daughters in the conference room, their eyes burning holes through me. The tension in the air was suffocating, but I was ready for it. Dad, what the freak? Olivia snapped, her hands slamming onto the table. Do you have any idea what you've done? The whole goddamn internet is blowing up with videos of you knocking the hell out of that guy with a bat. What the hell was Mom doing there? I didn't bother with explanations. Instead, I slid a thick folder across the table. She was there because she just finished screwing him in a cheap motel, I said flatly. That guy, he wasn't just some random dude. He was her boyfriend. These are the reports and photos from the private investigator I hired. Go ahead, take a look. Emma hesitated before flipping through the pages of the folder, her face twisting in shock as she processed the images. The timestamps, the undeniable proof. Olivia, however, just stared at me, arms crossed, her jaw clenched. You knew who he was, didn't you? She accused. You knew he was a big deal, college football star, that he was going to go first or second round in the draft. I met her glare without flinching. Yeah, I knew, I said, my voice calm, emotionless. That was the point. He took something from me, so I took something from him. Olivia let out a humorless laugh. Jesus Christ, you ruined him. His career is dead. His body is wrecked. You're proud of that? Proud? I tilted my head. But I did what I meant to do. Emma swallowed hard, her voice quieter but just as sharp. Dad, you do realize he's going to sue you, right? And you're going to prison for a long time. I smirked. No, I won't. Olivia's frustration boiled over. God, stop. Be realistic. You can't get out of this. We looked it up, watched every legal show, read every damn article. You're done. I know I am, I said simply. I'm not trying to get away with it. Something in me cracked as I sat there looking at them. Reality hit me like a truck. I wouldn't be there when they graduated college, wouldn't walk them down the aisle at their weddings, wouldn't hold their children in my arms. For the first time since this whole nightmare started, I broke. Tears blurred my vision before I could stop them. I lowered my head, my hands gripping the edge of the table as my body shook. I cried. I felt movement beside me, and suddenly warm arms wrapped around me from both sides. My daughters, holding me up when I was falling apart. "Daddy, what's happening?" Emma's voice was barely a whisper. I swallowed hard, forcing the words out. "I'm dying, baby. I have pancreatic cancer, the worst kind there is. 2 months at best." Their gasps shattered the room. Then the screaming started. Emma clung to me like a child, sobbing into my shoulder. Olivia cursed under her breath, pacing furiously, shaking her head like she could will the truth away. Then another pair of arms wrapped around all three of us. I turned my head and saw Sophie, tears running freely down her face, pulling us into a huddle, holding us together when everything else was falling apart. We stayed like that, crying, breaking, mourning for what felt like hours. When I finally gathered myself, I sat them both down again. "Listen to me," I said firmly. "I will be gone before my trial ever starts. There is nothing they can take from me. Everything I owned, I got rid of before the attack. No house, no business, no money. The trust funds are already locked in under your names. The company, Sophie, you and Emma, own it now. Even if they try to foreclose, it's not in my name. My investments, cashed out, donated. There's nothing left for them to take." A harsh white light bore down on me across the table. A striking red-haired woman sat there, perfectly polished for the cameras. "Good morning," she began, her voice carrying the professional detachment of someone who'd done this 100 times before. "I'm Rachel Evans with crap news. Today I'm sitting down with Ethan Carter, the man currently facing charges for brutally attacking a star college football player. Mr. Carter has agreed to speak with us today despite the ongoing legal proceedings." She turned briefly to the camera before shifting her attention back to me. "Mr. Carter, I have to admit, I didn't expect you to agree to an interview. Aren't you concerned about violating the judge's gag order?" I leaned back in my chair, smirking. "Not in the slightest. By the time this airs and the judge sees it, there won't be a damn thing he can do about it." Rachel arched a perfectly sculpted brow. "But he could charge you with contempt of court and throw you in jail." I chuckled. "Yeah, so what? Jail doesn't scare me." "They just spent 2 hours in a motel room," I continued, locking eyes with her. "He took something from me, the most important thing in my life, so I took his most important thing, his football career." Rachel nodded, crossing her legs. "Well, you succeeded. But what about your wife? She's just as responsible. Are you planning revenge on her too?" A slow grin spread across my face. "Oh, absolutely. But don't worry, it's not physical, no violence, nothing illegal, just good old-fashioned consequences. In fact, everything's already done. She just doesn't know it yet." Rachel tilted her head. "And when will she find out?" I chuckled. "When this interview airs." She sighed, shifting in her seat. "All right, let's circle back to your future. You keep acting like prison doesn't concern you." "It doesn't," I said coolly. "Let me explain why. This all started a little over a month ago. I'd been feeling off, tired all the time, no energy. So I went to the doctor, ran some tests. A week later, I got the results." I exhaled slowly. "They weren't good." Rachel's expression remained composed, but I noticed the subtle shift in her posture. I walked out of the doctor's office, still trying to process everything, when I saw Laura's car pulling out of the university parking lot, but she wasn't driving. Her lips parted slightly. "Tyler Reed was," I nodded. "Exactly, so I followed them, watched them check into a motel, waited 2 hours, watched them leave. I already knew what was happening, I just needed proof. So I hired a private investigator, but at the same time I started making plans. At first, my goal was to make sure Laura would be taken care of when I was gone. After that day, she was erased from my plans. Every single move I made after that was to secure Olivia and Emma's futures. When I die, they get everything. Rachel stared at me. So that's why you're not worried? Exactly, I said, letting that hang in the air. The doctor told me I have aggressive pancreatic cancer. No cure, no treatment, 2 months at best. More realistically, I won't be here in a month. The trial, that won't even start for 3 months. They can't punish a dead man. Before I could exhale, the next one walked in. Blonde, tall, a face built for TV. This is Claire Harper with crap news, she announced, flashing her polished plastic smile. The judge was going to have a stroke when these aired. Didn't matter. I had decided to get every interview done in a single day before he could do a damn thing about it. This was my last day of freedom anyway. By the time the final camera shut off, I was drained. The next morning, Sophie drove me to hospice. The judge was predictably livid, ready to send a team of cops to haul me into jail for contempt, but my lawyer and doctor beat him to the punch. They laid it all out. If he wanted to lock me up, he'd have to pay for round-the-clock medical care, astronomical costs. That little detail made its way to the press. So instead, he settled for slapping an ankle monitor on me, making sure I didn't leave hospice. I laughed in his face when they strapped it on. Where the hell was I going to go? Sophie, Olivia and Emma visited almost daily. I didn't expect them to, but they came anyway, sitting with me, pretending things were normal. Laura tried to visit. I had her name scrubbed from the visitor list. She sent letters through the girls. They handed them to me, hopeful, waiting for me to soften. I tossed them straight into the trash, unopened. The DA tried to push the trial date back. Mark fought it. Eventually, it became obvious I wouldn't be around long enough to see a courtroom. They quietly dropped the case. In the doorway, someone moved. Laura. I hadn't seen her since that one visit to the prison right after my arrest. She looked different. Smaller, like the weight of everything had finally crushed her. She hesitated, then forced herself forward, slow, like she thought I might shove her away. She lowered herself into the chair beside my bed. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I'm sorry." I exhaled. "I know." She swallowed. "I wish I had left you something." I let out a humorless chuckle. "You didn't have anything to leave me, and even if you did, it would have just ended up in that lawsuit." She flinched. I sighed. "Doesn't matter. I was the one who screwed up first anyway. I started the affair." Her breath caught. "I forgive you." I turned my head, looking at her. "I told the girls to make sure you don't end up on the street, not because I care, but because they do." Tears welled in her eyes. "I forgive you too," I scoffed. "Doesn't change anything." She wiped at her face. "That arsehole is going to take everything, isn't he?" "Probably," I muttered. "But as long as you've got a place to sleep and enough money to survive, you'll get by." She let out a shaky breath. "I should have been here. I should have been with you these last few months." I let my head rest back against the pillow. "Doesn't matter, Laura. I left you first. I could have faced it, could have accepted it. Instead, I went looking for revenge. You did what you thought you had to do." She whispered, "I can't even blame you." I didn't answer. She hesitated, then reached forward, her fingers brushing against mine. Light, tentative, like she wasn't sure she had the right to touch me. "I never stopped loving you," she murmured, "even when I was at my worst. And I will love you until the day I die." I stared at her. my vision already blurring at the edges. "And when that happens," she continued, voice cracking, "I hope we find each other again." I was so damn tired, I let my eyes close. Her fingers curled over mine, barely there. "You are my soulmate," she whispered. "I forgot that for a while, but I remember now." I felt my body sinking, slipping away. Her voice followed me. "Rest now, my love. Go in peace. We'll meet again." Gok nin kwa, Olivia. Dad had everything arranged long before he died. The funeral was prepaid, the burial plots bought, and he even set up a separate account for Mom, just in case she ever needed it. Whether she deserved it or not was another question, but Dad made sure she wouldn't be left out in the cold. The service was private, strictly family, but we allowed 2 reporters, Rachel Evans and Claire Harper, to attend and document it. They'd covered Dad's story from the start with a level of respect we didn't see from the rest of the media circus. As expected, Tyler Reed sued, going after Dad's estate, thinking there'd be some payout waiting for him. But Dad had left nothing behind for anyone to take. They tried the business and trust funds, but those doors were shut and locked long before Dad swung that bat. Mum, though, different story. A judgment was slapped against her for $20 million. Didn't matter that she didn't have a cent to her name, they hit her with it anyway. Emma and I handled it. We brought her into the company as a cook and housekeeper, room and board covered, small allowance for whatever she needed. Completely above board, perfectly legal. Mum doesn't date anymore. She goes out, has her fun, stays out all night sometimes, but nothing serious, just casual flings, nothing lasting. She's made it clear she's not looking for anything real. She had that once and threw it away. Now she's waiting. She says she'll stay free until she meets Dad again. As for Tyler Reed, he's exactly where you'd expect him to be, rotting away in his parents' house. Stairs are a problem these days, so they set him up downstairs. He never went back to school, got himself expelled, then refused to enroll anywhere else. No future, no career, no options. Just a guy sitting in his room, playing video games, waiting for his payday. But from what we hear, his parents are getting sick of it. They were fine waiting for the lawsuit to bring in money, but now they're realizing there's nothing coming. His days of freeloading are numbered. Meanwhile, Emma and I run the company now, officially. Sophie still checks in from time to time, but she's mostly enjoying her well-earned retirement, traveling, taking Mom on cruises a couple of times a year. Emma's got a steady boyfriend now, and it's looking serious. Me, well, I haven't met Mr. Right yet, but I do have a few misses in my life. One of them might be losing that Miss title soon. Her name's Rachel Evans, a local news reporter,